Why are we forced into these battles? How did it come to this situation where communities all over New South Wales are fighting to protect the places they call home? Ultimately, it boils down to a lack of scrutiny, an increasingly opaque landscape of deals, arrangements, conversations, agreements, all of which occur behind closed doors. Not just closed, but tightly sealed and reinforced with draconian legislation that muffles, indeed muzzles, our voices. There is corruption here, the corruption of incremental change delivering unanticipated consequences. That such corruption might deliver corruption is a serious concern. Let me give you an example of that incremental change. Today, a good idea designed to protect the environment is being used as a weapon against communities. Environmental impact statements were supposed to ensure we got it right, that we understood what we were doing when we built something. Today, an EIS runs to thousands of pages of mind-bendingly torturous text, boring and designed to deter communities from even bothering to read them. It is a shame. Quite right. Almost imperceptibly, the benign EIS became the monster it is today and no longer serves its original purpose, as it is used to justify bad decisions. By such gentle degrees, we cede ever-increasing power to others. Bureaucrats, politicians, big business. But the foundation of that power is secrecy. In the darkness, deals thrive. But it doesn't have to be like this. Today we say, and we will continue to say until there is a Royal Commission into Transport for New South Wales and the RMS, we say no more. No more government departments misusing freedom of information legislation. No more deals that aren't exposed to the glare of public scrutiny. No more of the government thumbing their noses at Parliament and refusing to produce legitimately requested documents. No more misuse of legislation, and no more fake promises. Yep, ladies and gentlemen, Trump may have fake news. In New South Wales, we have fake promises. We've all heard them. But no more. Today, the shouts for a fair go, delivered from the symbolic heart of the fair go, will be heard in Parliament. And they are going to continue to be heard until there's a Royal Commission that peels back the darkness and exposes the planning, funding and delivery processes to the sterilising effects of sunlight. In closing, I say, we want a Royal Commission and we want it now. Thank you very much. I'm going to put a shout out. There's a couple of people who should be up here with me now. Oh, sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, can I just alert you to the fact that we have a documentary maker here today. If you have any concerns about, we're going to use an exclusion process and assume that everybody's cool with the fact that we're being filmed. If anyone has any concerns, could you please speak to Malcolm, who's going to wave frantically in a minute. And Malcolm's over the back there. That wasn't quite the idea. Malcolm, come forward a minute. Just in case anybody wants to be excluded from the process, can you please let Malcolm know, this gentleman here? Otherwise, we're hoping the documentary is going to be as hard-hitting as the story actually is. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, can I introduce one of the warriors that is fighting for a better outcome, and that's Catherine Williams from Bell's Line of Road Community Action Group. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for allowing us to talk on behalf of the Bells Line of Road Corridor Action Group, now Community Action Group. I've never been called a warrior before, but I quite like it. Next time I'll bring my shield and sword, but today I just have words. So basically we were set up to represent people in the Hawkesbury West and the Nepean in response to a visionary infrastructure project that threatened our natural environment and our way of life. Our lives were turned absolutely upside down on the 26th of March when members of our community received sealed envelopes announcing that our homes would now be within a corridor being reserved for freight trucks a compatible tollway for freight trucks that will be built in 20 to 40 years. We were then told to relax, get on with our lives now that we knew where the motorway was going to go and our community could just get on with it. After the initial shock had passed, we sought information about this corridor, but we didn't get any. So we turned to social media. We were discovered that this was an unfair process that lacked transparency and consistency, and so we came together on the BLORCAG Facebook page. By June, we had more than 1,800 members. Through this Facebook page, I've watched our members move from confusion and grief to disbelief to anger as the so-called consultation process unfolded. And while the announcement to scrap our corridor on the 22nd of June was welcomed, we now realise that there is much work to do to ensure that any development in the Hawkesbury proceeds in a manner that maintains the things we value most. We would like to highlight the following. We are greatly concerned that the transport infrastructure in the Hawkesbury is primarily influenced by developers and by businesses in the Central West. It has nothing to do with the communities and the environment through which they pass. We feel that the consultation process with our community and the information given to us was absolutely inadequate. This flawed process caused severe stress and resulted in adverse mental and physical health effects. Indeed, some of us even expressed the concern that they might like to commit suicide. This is very concerning. We remain extremely concerned about the inadequacy of the compensation that is provided to those whose properties are taken for infrastructure. These people do not want to move from their homes. Their lives are focused in and around their homes, and their home is their main asset. We say that people should get just compensation, and the best solution would be a like-for-like property. Some would say that BLORCAG's a strange name for a community group, but we're quite fond of it now. We're here to stay. We have now incorporated. We had an expectation that infrastructure projects would be based on well-researched business cases. We had an expectation that infrastructure projects would be developed after extensive consultation to incorporate valuable local knowledge. We had an expectation that infrastructure projects would be rolled out with empathy and respect. After all, we live in Australia, right? Our naive expectations have now well and truly been put to rest. Things need to change. Just like the banks have been held to task, those responsible for infrastructure planning in New South Wales need to be answerable for their actions too. As citizens who care, we can make this happen. BLORCAG call for a Royal Commission into transport planning in New South Wales. Thank you.
One of the great things about this call for a Royal Commission is that it's backed by 24 other community groups, and we're receiving notifications from other groups that are coming in on social media. So the list grows almost as I speak, and that speaks to the seriousness with which communities view this issue. One of our partners is No West Connects Public Transport, and I'd like you to welcome Adrian Schilling, who's going to speak on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the organisers for the opportunity to speak here today. I'm from Petersham, and I'm from a group called No West Connects Public Transport, and there's our wonderful call flute up on the light stand there. We formed in 2013 when word got out that the M4 was going to be expanded, the M4 East, and that there was to be a huge expansion of tollways into the city and beyond. A lot of people said, oh, that's not going to happen, they'll never do it. But they're doing it. They haven't finished, but they're underway. And there is still time to stop the next stage. I also wish to say that No West Connects Public Transport has its own groups around the inner west. As each suburb found out it was to be affected, another group formed. And we all work under the umbrella of either West Connects Action Group or No West Connects Public Transport in a bid to work together. Currently, No West Connects Public Transport are sponsoring a coalition of like-minded groups from across Sydney to try and fix New South Wales transport. I'll just wait for the bike. Again. And it's very interesting to me to hear Kate talking about the groups that are forming here. It seems to me that the groups that we're forming coalitions with could all meet in the middle, because what we have at stake here is the destruction of our city and indeed large swathes of our state. Those of us who care what happens to our little communities have to keep fighting. And it's as Kate said, the environmental impact statements that used to be an opportunity for communities to feed back what is wrong are now little more than tick-a-box exercises. And if you don't believe me, for the M4 widening and the next stage, there were 10 hard copy volumes of EIS, often impenetrable, written in jargon, but embedded in one of those volumes was the telltale information that most of the time saving that would be gained on the finished tollway would be approximately 4 minutes. All of that cost for 4 minutes time. The bargain. Many of you probably already know, at least I hope you know, about the terrible destruction of the inner west suburbs. You may have seen it on the telly, you may have driven past it or through it. I'm speaking here of Haberfield, a Federation Garden suburb that you would have thought would be protected forever. Instead, there are people in this crowd today who have sat on the roofs of houses that were summarily demolished to widen a road. There are people who had to sell their house for a small amount, not nearly enough for the value, and could no longer afford to live in the area. There are people who in St Peters have lived in workers' cottages built in the 1880s, all gone. So we could cut another swathe of another part of this dreadful roadway, along with mature trees like this, mown down, almost with glee, because a lot of us who are here today have watched it happen. It is shocking to think that in 2017-18 we are subjected to this destructive behaviour by our governments and by their agencies who appear not to care what is happening. If you could see and experience what the people of Haberfield, Ashfield, Kingsgrove, St Peters and lots of other suburbs are enduring, it is like a war zone, and I am not kidding. 24-hour noise, drilling, vibration, houses being shaken to the point where their walls are cracking. And the dust and the noise and the total disruption to the local areas is driving people crazy. It's terrible for children who can't sleep. It's terrible for their parents trying to get them to school and to go to work. All of this is done in the name of the government and some kind of promise of better transport, when all the while the money that is being sunk into this roadway, tollway, is being leached from public transport, which we should be demanding. If you are a car commuter on the M4, you may have been, as you sat in the traffic gridlock, overhead bridges being festooned with banners telling you that 51% of the Sydney Motorway Corporation is up for grabs to the private sector. Did you know that? Did you know that we are not permitted to know what is going on about that? It's all commercial in confidence, even though it's our asset that is about to be sold. Now, one of the bidders is Transurban. Hands up if you've heard of Transurban. Very good. They own a near monopoly of tollways in this country, to the point where the ACCC is so concerned about that, they are conducting an inquiry into this matter. They were due to put out their opinion last week, but the matter is so complex They've asked for an extension of time till the 6th of September. But is that stopping the government from trying to flog the 51%? No! So it is up to us to get active and start deluging government representatives, particularly the Premier, but also prominent members of the Parliament, and let them know what you think about this. Do you know when the next state election is? When is it? 23rd. We've still got time.
Don't vote Dom! Don't vote Dom! Don't vote Dom! Don't vote Dom!
Yes, I gathered. So, not your favourite person?
Not Dom!
Now, amazingly, lest we let the Labor Party off the hook, Luke Foley, Leader of the Opposition, wants to offer a cashback scheme for regular users of the M4, M5. Did you know that?
We all pay.
Right. Now, Michael West, who's a former Herald journalist and an acclaimed business writer, has said that while this action would be popular with private motorists who use these roads, but as the M4 tolls rise by more than 4% per year, the cost to the public, that's us, the taxpayers, is enormous. Think about this. The taxpayers will fund that cashback scheme, and then the money that is paid would still go to the tollway owners, not back to the state's coffers. So we're paying double. Meantime, stage 3 of WestConnex has not yet begun. That's what they call the missing link. That is between Haberfield all the way through to St Peters. Now, it's been approved, but it hasn't really started. But government departments are trying to make like it's started, so they're already acquiring houses on Victoria Road and putting up fences and doing test drilling. I think the message is meant to be, there's nothing you can do. But we in the Inner West have kept fighting, and we will continue to do so until this monstrous behemoth is stopped. And I think the idea of a Royal Commission is brilliant, because as with the Banking Royal Commission, there's a whole lot of stench that needs to be brought out into the sunlight, as we know. But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, there is, and I hope you know this, an upper house inquiry about to start. Did you know that? Submissions are being called for and will close on the 31st of August. It had unanimous support. If you want to come and see our No West Connects table at the end of my talk, there are people there now who can give you guidance about how you might like to make a submission. While it doesn't have the powers of a Royal Commission, we are hoping that people will come forward with information that hitherto has been kept under the carpet and bring it out for the media to tell us all what's really going on. Finally, I want to say that the coalition called Fix New South Wales Transport comes from groups not only across Sydney, including groups here, including Blawtag, including Badgerys Creek, including Blue Mountains, including people on the F6, but also from Newcastle, where all their buses have been privatised. Every one. Did you know that? So they are in chaos as we speak, because the bus timetables are so disrupted, and not even the government bus drivers have yet been paid. We also have people from Illawarra as part of our coalition, because they too are suffering from overcrowded trains and timetables that are not working. We really must band together. And to that end, on Saturday the 11th of August, in the CBD, that's Sydney, not Parramatta, we are having what we call a lantern walk for 2 hours. And we are making lanterns to walk around a selected part of the CBD to shine a light to the public on the nonsense that has become transport in not only Sydney, but the regions and the state. The money that is being sunk into these tollways and roads is money that could also be used to enhance and integrate very efficient public transport connections. Not only heavy rail, some light rail, some metro and some buses. But at the moment, they're all separated and articulated. We must work together, and I say this is our state. It is not the ownership of a handful of, yes, very wealthy, very influential people. We are the 99%. We own the assets. We paid for them with our taxes. We must take the power back. Thank you.
Just while Beatrice gets up on our stage, I'd just like to add something to what Adrian said. It's something I wasn't aware of, but apparently it's difficult to be sure, but it looks like the contracts with the road builders contain a no competition clause. Now, I think that's been spoken about publicly in terms of no competition from other roads. What I didn't realise was that it also switches off public transport competition where the tollways run. So effectively it switches the lights off on public transport anywhere that's in competition with a new toll road. If that's the case, then there genuinely is a need for a very strong spotlight to be put on these contracts. I find that really disturbing. The last person who's going to speak this morning about the call for papers, the call for a Royal Commission, is Beatrice Anastasi from Northridge. I'm going to give it its initials, NRDCAA.
Can you hear me? Right into it? Okay, I'm going to keep this very short, and I'm going to say, I don't know about you, but I am sick and tired of having to put up with cheap and nasty planning solutions. I don't know about you, but I'm sick of being threatened that if we don't accept the crumbs that are thrown our way, we will get nothing. I think that we should take that back, and we should take the power back. And I say that because we have way too little to gain and way too much to lose. As we stand here in this wonderful place called Thompson Square, this gem that belongs not only to you or I, but to the whole of Australia, what are we going to gain? A 2-lane bridge. I say that's not good enough, Gladys. I say that's not good enough, Don. I say take it back to the drawing board. I say let's bring on this Royal Commission because we are being cheated. Thank you.
So today we hope that the Parliament is going to hear us. On the 11th of August we hope they are going to see us, and if they refuse those two opportunities, then in March next year they are going to feel us at the ballot box. And I conclude by saying, what do we want? Royal Commission. When do we want it? Let's do that one more time just to make sure they heard it in Macquarie Street. I'm speaking about Macquarie Street, Sydney, not just over the road here. What do we want? Royal Commission. When do we want it? Now. Absolutely. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
As part of the segue between the two groups, we were going to have the pipers, but they didn't play for us before, so we're going to move straight on to welcoming one of our...
Waiting for the pipers. It's, as always, wonderful to be here, and I acknowledge that this was and always will be Aboriginal land, and pay respects to elders past and present. Really, the people to congratulate today are this community. This is a community that has stood by its convictions for 5 years. And in fact, more than, you deserve the applause here. And it's not just turning up occasionally. It's being here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 5 years. Some of you have faced court for your convictions. Some of you have paid fines for your convictions. Many of you have put saving Thompson Square at the core of your actions and your lives because of your convictions. We know that this is a place of Aboriginal significance, it's a place of colonial significance, and it's a place of community significance, and it deserves to be saved so future communities can continue to use it. From the start, Harry Terry, Pete Reynolds and a whole host of other people were with me in this square more than 5 years ago as I learnt about the threat that it faced. My state Labor colleague Peter Primrose, who's standing just at the back of the crowd, was here with us right from the start. State Labor has backed you all the way. Linda Burney, as Deputy Leader, spoke from the balcony at one of those very first rallies. Penny Sharp's been here, Jodie McKay. And today I can share with you a media announcement by Opposition Leader Luke Foley, who's today called on the Premier Gladys Berejiklian to delay any work on the Windsor Bridge replacement project until the parliamentary inquiry report is presented. As Luke points out, it's not really going to take them long. It's coming out in 1 month to the day. So in a month we will know what that upper house inquiry, backed by the shooters and fishers, the Greens and Labor, will reveal about the process used to make the decisions that you and I know are wrong for this community. Of course, federally, everybody in federal Labor has been here from the Kevin Rudd first visit through to our current leader, Bill Shorten. Tanya Plibersek fell in love with this place in the last election campaign as she saw it as a little piece of Jane Austen transplanted in Australia, recognising the Georgian beauty that it has. Mark Butler was here only a few weeks ago for a second visit, still stunned that this area is under threat. We've also had a support from our leader, our Environment Shadow Minister, Tony Burke, who has joined me in the ongoing call to provide national emergency heritage listing to this space, and which would have been a great way to try and give the state government a way to put a pause on this project while those matters were looked at. However, the Federal Environment Minister has not agreed to that, but in a remarkable step of bipartisanship in recognising that this is a heritage significant site, only a few months ago he wrote to the Premier. So Josh Frydenberg, the Federal Environment Minister, yes, he's a Liberal, he agreed with me and wrote to the Premier and asked her to reconsider this project, citing the heritage significance of Thompson Square. And have we had a reply from the Premier? No, not a word. But what that shows you is that the only people who have failed this community are the New South Wales Liberals. They are the only ones who will not concede the significance of this site. No one else thinks that $101 million for one extra lane is a good result for the Hawkesbury. Not a single group. So what do we need? We need this square to be saved. We need a third crossing that would take the existing traffic out of this square so that it can be returned to the community, and that this area can be the heritage economic lifeblood of the Hawkesbury, which is what it once was and what it deserves to be again. But this government is not listening. Not only are they not listening, but they don't even show up. They don't even show up to tell people why they're taking the position they're taking. In fact, I understand that the closest any Liberal official has got to this event today is the balcony of the Macquarie Arms, and that's a disgrace. So no wonder we have a community calling for a Royal Commission, because we are feeling ignored and disdained by this arrogant state government. We deserve accountability and we deserve transparency. These are things every community deserves. And like you, I will keep on fighting till the truth of this project is revealed. Stay strong and maintain your rage.
Thank you very much, Susan. Our Mayor is another gem, a friend and a supporter, and also an ambassador. So please welcome to our stage Hawkesbury Mayor Mary Lyons Bucket.
Thanks, Harry. Thank you, everyone, and welcome here today. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Darug people, and I recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge the importance of this particular site to our local Aboriginal people and their major contribution to the shaping of the Hawkesbury region. Sadly, parts of our history have involved actions of which we cannot be proud. However, we are pleased now at our council to be working in conjunction with our local community to develop our reconciliation action plan and move positively into the future. I also acknowledge the presence here today of Deputy Mayor Barry Calvert and councillors Danielle Wheeler, Pete Reynolds and John Ross. Today we celebrate an amazing feat of dedication and perseverance to ensure an integral part of our early colonial past is kept for our future. In exercising our intergenerational responsibility, we have witnessed an example of sustained commitment through all of the seasons, year in, year out, 24 hours a day, regardless of what has been thrown at ambassadors in terms of weather, abuse, and in the literal sense, maybe some eggs or a bit of rotten produce or whatever people drove past and threw at people. Congratulations, Corb. 5 years. 5 years of vigilance and promotion of historical facts, of dissemination of information to the many interested visitors who have called by the tent, of forensically examining studies and reports, of submitting responses richly portraying the significance and importance of what we fight for here today. And 5 years of occupying the oldest remaining town square in Australia, with its intact Georgian architecture around here, lining a place of public assembly which is saturated with history and a foundation stone of our development as a nation. This has been 5 years of service to Australians now and for the generations to come. Every single person who has stood up and raised their voice against this destructive proposal, which does nothing to enhance or advance our area, should be proud and should know they have stood up for what it means to be proud of our heritage and history. Not like the hollow words of politicians who claim to care and to pretend to protect what is valuable, but good solid people who have stepped up and said, we will not accept the expenditure of public funds on something from which we gain nothing but lose the very soul of our Hawkesbury and thus our national heritage. Today there is a joint call out for a Royal Commission into Transport Infrastructure Planning and Delivery in New South Wales. Whereas we do not as yet have a finalised position on this at a council level, I personally would welcome this commission to proceed. And given 8 out of 12 of our councillors do not support the proposed bridge replacement project, I would assume the support would be at that same level. We recently saw major concerns raised in our council about the flawed process which rolled out announcements of Western Sydney corridors without adequate consultation or engagement with those affected. People want answers. People want involvement in the decisions, and people want the decisions to equip us for a better future, not destroy the assets on which our future depends. This government has, on occasions, sensibly listened to the community and reversed certain decisions deemed unpopular, such as the forced council amalgamations, the mega expensive stadium proposals, the greyhound ban, and most recently, some sections of the Western Sydney corridors. If ever there was a time for a well-executed backflip, it is right here, right now. Because to allow this project to proceed will indelibly stamp this government's legacy as one which defaced the character of Sydney from the east to the west, and which stole the very heart of our heritage and identity. $101 million. This is a lot of money. Public money, our money. Sensible planning would ensure newly constructed infrastructure is done in such a way to increase and strengthen our resilience into the future. We see down the road here when you come into Windsor the mistake of how compromised the heritage building, the Windsor Toll House, became when a road was put right past it in 1976. We saw the debacle of the Tibby Cotter Bridge across Anzac Parade and the cost blowouts associated with the failure to adequately investigate the scope and design of that project, not to mention the recent reports that it's actually been built in the wrong spot. We know from reports that the heritage here will be detrimentally impacted. We know there will not be improvements to the ever-growing level of traffic congestion we suffer, and we know Windsor's capacity to capitalise on heritage-based tourism will be severely impaired. So why should we accept a second-rate solution for our residents, already disadvantaged in terms of public transport and infrastructure? This road is one of the major exits out of a rapidly growing city, and yet it is not deemed important enough to be upgraded to a standard which gives it capacity into the future. Recent news reports and commentary have emphasised a growing dissatisfaction with how the planning of our city is heading. Some call this excessive and rapid growth progress, but progress implies moving to a state of improvement, and there is no evidence of this in this project. Some people, the critics who have apparently found no satisfaction in knowing a starting date for the project, say it is the existence of the tent or the judicial review court proceeding which has delayed the bridge. Embrace the power, Corb. The online and physical behaviour of some bridge replacement supporters has been disturbing. I have been said to be one-sided on this issue. Apart from not knowing how anyone could be two-sided on this issue, it highlights the misunderstanding of the role of the mayor. A mayor is not an impartial voice who sits on the fence hoping all councillors might agree on everything. A mayor is a voice of leadership, and I am proud to lead a majority of councillors who were elected to their roles on strong platforms in opposition to this substandard proposal. Again, congratulations, Corb, and to all the other groups here who stand up and fight for justice and transparency in decision-making, for accountability in expenditure of public funding, for preservation of what we value, and for good and sensible planning into the future. You have all shown persistence in the face of intense criticism. You have maintained a calm presence in the face of brazen hostility. 8 out of 12 councillors, 2/3 of your elected body, support you and will continue to support you. Be proud and fight on.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Mary. It has been said that the actually Tippercotti Bridge is not in the wrong place, it's exactly in the right place. What they have to do is move the stadium over. And that seems a very sensible idea. Now, out of the mists of time comes arguably our strongest supporter. And that's our Governor, Lachlan Macquarie.
Fellow citizens and fellow soldiers, His Majesty, in the year of our Lord 1810, having been graciously pleased to honour me with the chief command and government of the colony of New South Wales, I now think it my duty on this public occasion of assembling you together to honour a milestone which is, by any measure, remarkable in the history of the colony. For your endurance and determination in maintaining unceasing presence in my square, I thank you. For your resolution and unflinching dedication to the protection of my great legacy, you have my unstinting gratitude and admiration. For the power and passion that has fueled your commitment to this unequal battle, I salute you. It is a matter of some concern to me that you, my fellow citizens, have been required for the past 5 long years to protect this remarkable location, one I hold most dear in its connections to the remarkable and esteemed dear friend of mine, Mr. Andrew Thompson. It has been my earnest wish to promote the welfare and prosperity of this rising colony in every way possible, and it was with this ambition I commissioned the mighty works above which I stand today. I am, I confess, most deeply disappointed to see the infrastructure I commissioned being treated with such contempt. The construction of Francis Greenway's magnificent wharf has remained testament for over 200 years to the fertility and productivity of the Hawkesbury soils. That Greenway's only wharf should be treated with such disrespect defies comprehension. Because of this, I can assure you your efforts will not be forgotten by history, any more than the betrayal by today's state government will be forgotten. This betrayal is a denial of the cordial support I was led to anticipate from those gentlemen, civil and military, placed at the heads of several public departments of government, there being, I am most relieved to report, no ministers to interfere with the competent management of the colony during the period of my governorship. I had hoped the greed and incompetence which have unfortunately existed in this colony for some time past would have, through your informed advocacy, been terminated forever, giving way to a more becoming spirit of conciliation, harmony and unanimity, thereby allowing for a more rational solution to this vexed issue of crossing the Hawkesbury River. But to attain such a desirable object, it is necessary for the individuals who today pass themselves off as the government of this colony to conduct themselves with propriety, conforming to laws, regulations and precepts established for the benefit of the colony. Were your current administration to conform to the simple rule of measuring their actions against the greater benefit of the colony, there would be no requirement for today's gathering, as any benefit currently attached to their project is not the benefit to the community. In early September, the RMS's favoured contractor, Georgiou, not Scottish, will commence this awful destruction of this, my most loved place in the colony. But I say to you, it is in this place where the evil of their actions will be for all to see. The names of those who permitted this terrible project to proceed shall be inscribed with the names of those who, like Georgiou, allowed delivery of gold to transcend doing what was right, and their names shall stand as a testament to the betrayal of not just those who came after the first people, but of the First Nations themselves. As is the way of those of us who come from the other side, I offer you a prediction, no more accurate than any other prediction from the other side, but deserving perhaps of some scant attention. For it has come to my ken, the agency responsible for this great destruction is determined to close the bridge in early October, but only to the behemoths that disturb the shades who reside in this lovely place. Were their intention to give greater peace to the shades, I should not repeat such news, but I fear their motivation is less honourable. May the future bear witness to the accuracy or otherwise of this shade's prediction. My time with you on this occasion is almost at an end. I shall leave shortly, greatly pleased by the gathering I've seen and the resolve that I have witnessed. I commend you for your steadfastness and leave you with some final thoughts. It will at all times constitute my chief happiness to see your virtuous arguments continue to be prosecuted with the greatest energy and integrity. Be honourable and unshakable in the defence of what is right. Do not allow the Philistines to gain greater ascendancy, for one day you may awake to discover their dominance irreversible. From the troops, in the coming days and months of travail, I shall at all times expect a most vigilant discharge of every part of their duty. And I fondly hope that their steadiness, sobriety, and strict discipline will be so exemplary as to preclude the painful necessity of providing the Crown with any legitimacy in resorting to any punishment. In saying this, I presume upon nothing less than the absolute virtue and goodwill of the administration. And no less than the day I made my original commitment to this land, the honest, sober, and industrious inhabitant, untainted by the stain of undeserved personal gain, will ever find in me a friend and a protector. Godspeed to us all.
Three cheers for the Governor. Hip hip. Hip hip. Hip hip. And a big applause for Mrs. Macquarie. An invitation was sent to the Treasurer, the Minister for Industrial Relations, the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party, and Member for Hawkesbury. The mail must be very slow because I haven't heard a reply. Well, here we are again, happy as can be, all good friends and jolly good company. Believe it or not, as Ripley once said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of occupation, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 1,827 days. That means that's 21,924 ships, a total of 1,696 hours, but who's counting? It is not too late for you to be part of this history-making occupation. If interested in staffing a shift, please give your name and contact details to our ambassadors at the tent. We'd be only too happy to welcome you. Now, as you know, when we started, we thought this was only going to be a couple of weeks, a symbolic gesture. We started with a tent over here. We sat out in the open or under an umbrella. However, as you will have noticed, as we have aged, we appear to have a greater need for creature comforts. Our occupation is clearly the longest such European protest in Australian history by far. As you also, some of you will know, Corb's Facebook is now being archived by the State Library, so the records of our occupation will be there for all to see forever. We have made history. The effect of our presence can be judged by the increasing agitation of those who oppose us. And we find that very strange, because what we're calling for is a bypass to meet the increasing traffic needs, which does not damage our heritage, rather than have a third-rate option that's being forced upon us. We want the truth. The Hawkesbury has a raft, if that's the appropriate term, of third-rate bridges. The Mayor has already mentioned the Fitzroy Bridge down here, the bridge that has claimed to be flood-free. The only trouble is in a flood you can't get to it, because both sides of it are flooded. The Arramundi Bridge, which should have gone from high ground to high ground, but now provides a lovely S-bend, or keeps the S-bends, which is fabulous for motorbike riders who are training for GP. Or the bridge to nowhere, across the Gross. Or you could even argue that the bridge at Jim Anderson Bridge, which should have been 4 lanes, is only 2 lanes because it's used for it's supposed to be a flood evacuation system. And yet you still only got your 2 lanes. So we're used to it, and we're sick of it, and it's about time there is a change. The current budget for the Windsor Bridge, the 101 million that you heard already today, was just for the construction of the bridge and the works. Not the money has been spent so far. In the budget, the figure is $137 million and increasing. Remember, it started at 25 million, now 137 million and climbing. For that sort of money, I would expect a first-rate bypass. Now, we have one particular special guest, and that's Brian Pearson. I'm not sure where Brian is, but I saw him go past earlier today. He is one of the retired bridge engineers who worked for the RTA DMR for over 40 years. He and Ray Wedgwood made a submission to the inquiry and spoke at the inquiry. And we're blessed to have the talents, the skills, the knowledge of these men. So how about a round of applause for Brian. Now, Ray couldn't be with us today, but he did send an email. Congratulations and best wishes to the ambassadors for their sterling efforts over the past 5 years. Not only manning, or should he say womaning, the tent in your unique, historic Thompson Square in your desire to preserve your heritage, but also for the community spirit you have developed, the personal tales of family history, the unearthing of barely remembered artefacts such as the Macquarie Drain and Greenway Wharf have added to local awareness. No matter what the outcome of your protest is, I encourage you all to retain the spirit of community. Well done all. Regards, Ray. It has also been pointed out the interesting concepts behind the replacement bridge, because they could have designed a bridge that missed the remains of the Greenway Wharf and missed the barrel drain complex and had left those for show. But no, the design of their bridge was to put the piers almost exactly where parts of the Greenway Bridge Wharf are, and also to cover up what they had unearthed. It is duplicitous behaviour at the utmost. Now, most of all, I would like to recognise every ambassador who has staffed a shift, whether it is only one shift or 750 shifts over the 5 years. Without each and every ambassador, there would not be a roster, and hence there would not be an occupation. Ambassadors, this is your day. Celebrate it with pride. I am sure history will recognise your achievement as we do today. The plan was to have our oldest ambassador cut the cake, but the gentleman I call Jim Hopalong Cassidy is not well enough to be with us today. So if the cake is ready to be cut, it is. Before it is cut, I'm going to ask the person really who was instrumental in us being here, and that's Governor Macquarie, to go over to the table over there and cut the cake. But before he does, if you want to take a photograph of the cake, because that's something I just rushed up this morning to do, please do so before the Governor cuts the cake. While photographs are being taken, how about 3 cheers for the Royal Commission? Hip hip! Hip hip! Hip hip! And 3 cheers for Unity. Hip hip! Hip hip! Hip hip! And lastly, 3 cheers for the ambassadors. Hip hip! Hip hip! Hip hip! Now, that concludes the formal part of our ceremony today. However, a celebration is